Today, I'm going to go through the 6 most common mistakes that people make when it comes to tuning, because recurve tuning can be a little bit tricky, but in truth, if you just follow the correct things step by step, it's actually quite simple. You don't need to make it too complicated, and if you avoid doing these 6 mistakes today, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is to do with limb alignment. So limb alignment could probably have its own kind of video in terms of a couple of tips in that sort of thing and how to do this. But if you go to my website, onlinearcheryacademy.com, there's a full guide on the process of limb alignment here and how you kind of pick which limb to move, which way you move it, that kind of thing. So that's there. Maybe I'll do a separate video on that in the future as well. But what I wanted to mention today is the key thing that people get wrong about limb alignment is they don't de-string their bow. And depending on what bow you have, it used to be that Hoyts you would have to de-string because they had shims on the side of the limb alignment things and you would have to unscrew them and you're forced to de-string the bow. But with other manufacturers, Win, for example, you can just supposedly screw the limb alignment one way or the other and you don't need to de-string it. But the problem with this is, and the manufacturer says this, the problem with this is though, when you do this, it makes your life a whole lot harder in terms of getting the correct limb alignment. Because if you imagine, you've got the bow here, maybe we can enlarge one of these pictures. You've got the bow here, and on this part here, where my cursor is, you're going to basically put the Allen key in, turn the Allen key, and then once you've turned it, you're going to basically move, I think I've got another picture at the top of the page here, of the limb, that's a bit closer. You're going to move this bolt here, and you're going to shift the limb one way by moving the limb alignment. And when you do that, the bow is under poundage. So the result is, although you've moved the limb alignment, the limb doesn't fully move over because it's still got too much poundage, it's still got too much tension, essentially pushing the limb into the bow. So what then happens is, you move the limb alignment a bit, it doesn't move enough, and you think, okay, I need to do a bit more. So you do a bit more, it doesn't move enough, you do a bit more, and eventually you get it to the point where, okay, it looks like the limb alignment is straight now. And then you lock everything down, you shoot it, and after shooting it, it goes clunk and then moves. And then you've gone too far, essentially. So this is what happens, and this basically means that people go round and round and round in circles because when they adjust it, first of all, the limb doesn't move because it's under tension, and then they shoot it and it jumps too far, and then they have to go back the other way, and it's just a whole mess. So what I would say is, de-string your bow, move the limb alignment, tighten it slightly, and then restring, then shoot a couple of shots and check it again. It might feel like you're doing a lot more extra work and it's taking longer, but believe me, it's so much quicker. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is to do with Bareshaft testing. So we're going to go back here to the website. The second thing is about Bareshaft testing, and we're going to go down to the Bareshaft section. And the mistake people make here is they only check at one distance. So when you're doing Bareshaft testing, you must check at 2 distances. And the distances I recommend normally are 18 meters and 30 meters. And the reason for this is, it's possible, if you've got a false tune, or if you just happen to be checking the exact distance where your Bareshafts look tuned, it's possible to think your bow is tuned and it's not. And then you get some confusing results. So what we want to see here with the Bareshafts, we want 18 meters and 30 meters, because for example, if we take this right picture here, you can see the Bareshafts are high and right, okay? So obviously we need some knocking point adjustment, that's fine, and we can see maybe even once we do the knocking point adjustment and we move the Bareshafts down, so you would move the knocking point up, the Bareshafts would move down as a result. They're probably still going to be a little bit on the right side, so a little bit weak. So either we can maybe reduce the poundage, for example, that's a possible option. But anyway, you get the idea. So the thing is here, you want to make sure that you're checking it at both distances, because if the arrow is coming out of the bow, if I go to here, if the arrow is coming out of the bow and doing this, for example, then it could appear at one distance that it's weak, for example, at 18 meters. And then when you go to 30 meters, it might have gone past that kind of curve and then appear like it's stiff. So this is why you need to check at both distances. You must check at 2 distances. And this brings us on to the second point. As you can see in this picture, handily, because this is how you should do it, there's at least 3 Bareshafts. It's really hard to do Bareshaft tuning if you've got only, I mean, it's impossible with only one Bareshaft. Let's start there. It's really hard with only two Bareshafts, because if you've got a dodgy Bareshaft, if you've got one arrow that kind of goes a bit off, how do you know which Bareshaft is the correct one and which one is the bad one? If you've only got two, one of them, for example, you have your group in the gold, one Bareshaft goes left 8 and one Bareshaft goes right 8. Which one is the right one? You have no idea. So a minimum 3 Bareshafts, because then you actually get a sense of, okay, if you've got one that goes left and 2 that goes right, chances are the 2 that are going right are the good Bareshafts. Ideally, you would use more Bareshafts than that, especially if you're not at a level yet where the grouping is as tight. That's also a bit more helpful to have multiple Bareshafts as well. So that's the other thing. So far we've got limb alignment. You want to de-string your bow. Checking your Bareshafts at 18 meters and 30 meters, so 2 different distances. It doesn't have to be exactly that. Could be maybe like 15 meters and 30. I wouldn't worry about going past 30 meters though. That's something I should say. And then we've got using multiple Bareshafts, at least 3 Bareshafts. So those are the first 3 things. The next thing I wanted to say is about not tuning at a distance where you can keep your arrows in the gold. So you'll notice here, this is 30 meters with an 80 centimeter face. All of the fletched arrows, so if you just look at the fletched arrows, they're all within the gold. So they're all within a gold size group. You want to tune at a distance and a target face size where your group is within the gold, because that allows you to have a suitable reference of, okay, is it worth me trying to tune a bit more? Am I going to get any benefit from tuning anymore? Can I even get my Bareshafts within the group realistically if my group is too big? So you want to pick a distance where that is applicable to you. So maybe it's 30 meters with a big face. That doesn't matter. Put the big face on so you can see how your group size looks. And if your Bareshafts are in the gold, for example, if someone is shooting on a big face and their fletched arrows are in the gold and their Bareshafts are in the gold as well, that's fine. You don't need to tune more than that. And that would be essentially what it looks like on this right hand 80 centimeter target face. That would be perfectly fine tuning for someone who keeps most of their arrows within the gold on a big face at 30 meters. So that's the other thing. You want to tune at a distance that you can keep your arrows in the gold, and you don't want to go really past 30 meters. I know a lot of people are tempted to do Bareshaft tuning at 50 or even 70 meters. Honestly, it's a waste of time. You don't need to do that. So now, the 2 other points that I want to get to, there's actually the most important point, actually, I think is going to be the last one. So the penultimate point is going to be not checking for clearance issues first. So what I want to go to for that is, I just want to go to here. So you want to check for clearance issues because obviously you want your arrow to clear the bow. As you can see here, as it's coming out, it's bending and it's clearing the bow nicely in this video. If you've got issues, for example, if we go back here, if you've got issues with, when I say about clearance as well, I don't just mean clearance with the arrow on the bow, but I also mean on the face, the fingers, the chest guard, that kind of stuff. If you're having issues on the shot that's varying massively between shots, then you're not going to be able to get a consistent tune. And this is another reason why it's important to only do your tuning at a distance that you can keep your arrows in the gold, because by default, if you're keeping your arrows within the gold at that distance, that means there's no massive flyers. There's no huge outliers of arrows going way off because of maybe you've caught your chest guard or the string has caught your chin or something. There's no massive kind of issues to look at, and you're going to tune your bow within a good region. So a couple of things to look for. Chin drag. You want to basically see that the string is not smashing the chin too much on release. Okay. The other thing is if you've actually got fletches that are getting damaged. So if we go back to the screen here, if you've got fletches that are looking like this, when you're shooting your Bareshafts, they shouldn't be looking like this. If you're getting that, it's not really possible to tune. You need to sort this issue out first before you're tuning. And then the other most common one really is chest guard clearance. If you've got big contact with your chest guard and it's dragging a lot, that can make it really difficult. So that's a technique thing that you need to fix before you get to the tuning. I hope that makes sense, because as much as you try, you can't really tune if you're having these chest guard clearance issues. And I think I should make another video on that separately in terms of looking at that, how you can work on it and all those kind of things. Now, before we get to the final point, I do want to mention, because I always forget, my courses. If you haven't already, go over to onlinearcheryacademy.com. First of all, there's a free email newsletter I send out every week. I'm actually going to write one just after recording this video, so I'll be writing that and sending it out this evening as well. But if you don't already get that email, make sure you subscribe. I send out 3 tips, essentially, completely free every week. Equipment, tuning, mindset, all that kind of thing. Really, really good. Completely free. If you do want to join a paid course, you can join my Online Archery Academy video courses. There's a link on my website here. You can click explore the courses, and you also get 20% off as a reader of the website as well. So if you haven't had a look at those already, definitely encourage you to. I basically cover every single thing you need to know. If you're a complete beginner, I've got this Recurve Archery 101 for beginners. Or if you're an advanced archer, I've got the advanced course, which I think is about 6 hours of step-by-step videos going through basically every single stage of the shot, and also how you would then work on that in training as well, how you would improve it, how you would troubleshoot any issues, that kind of thing. So if you want to check those out, go there. For the final thing that I wanted to mention though as well, I wanted to talk about arrow flight. So let's scroll down to, I think we have, this is what I wanted to show you. The arrow flight is really important to not get waylaid or not get confused with which direction things are going. So what I mean by that is, let's take for example this plot here. So you can see that the arrows here, ignoring the height, a little bit on the weak side. Some people wrongly would add pressure button tension. That's not what you want to do. The arrows are a little bit weak. So for example, maybe you would reduce the poundage a little bit. Okay, so that's fine. But look at the arrow angle now. The arrow angle is with the knock to the right. So I want you to remember that. The knock is to the right. However, if you now think about the arrow coming out of the bow, and we go back to the video here. When the arrow comes out of the bow, let's just imagine what's going to happen if, so we'll pause it there. If the arrow was weak, what is going to happen to the arrow? Let's say you add 10 pounds to this bow, the arrow is going to bend more. So the initial launch out of the bow, the tail of the arrow is going to go left. The knock of the arrow is going to go left if the arrow is massively weak. So what does that mean is going to happen? That means if you're shooting at a close range, very, very close blank bail, for example, maybe with your stabilizer touching the target, that means you would expect, if you have a massively weak arrow, you would expect the initial reaction in the target to show that the knock is to the left for a weak arrow. So maybe you can see where I'm going with this. And this is why, if we scroll to, I can't remember where it is on this page, there's a blue box somewhere. Here we go. You want to use your close range up to 10 meters. Ideally, this is super close range, the initial impact of the bow. So what I like to do is stand with my stabilizer touching the target and shoot at a flat angle on not a straw target, importantly a foam target, and you look at the Bareshaft angle. You want to read the Bareshaft impact angle of the arrow to tell you about arrow spine. So at close range, if the knock is left, that's indicating that your arrow might be weak. And you've got the second test to check, which is go to 30 meters, and then you check, okay, yeah, also the arrow is weak. But here's the thing that I want you to really pay attention to. This is where people get confused. They look at the knock angle at 30 meters, and they see it's to the right, and they think, oh, but that must mean the arrows are stiff. Even though the Bareshafts are weak, and even though the initial reaction shows the knocks to the left. So what happens here is essentially the arrow comes out of the bow, and it's coming out of the bow, for example, it's too weak. The knock, this is going to be difficult because the camera is the other direction round because I'm pointing into the screen. So I'll show you on this video again. So the arrow, the knock is going to be left. It's going to come out of the bow and then it's going to correct. So then the knock swings to the right side. And then that's why at the longer distances, for example at 30, the knock is to the right because it's corrected and come back the other way. This is why it's really important to not overly look at the impact angle, especially when it's only a minor amount. It doesn't matter massively when it's a small amount like this. It can give you a little bit of information, but that's why you want to look at the initial angle. So we're going to go back to this box here, and I want to make sure this makes sense. So the Bareshaft impact angle, you use that up to 10 meters, you look at that. And this is where people get confused because they see the arrow flight and they don't differentiate between the first flight of the arrow coming out of the bow and the correction. That's why on this part, I've said about the Bareshaft flight angle between 10 meters and 30 meters. This is when you're shooting at a target that's 10 or 30 meters away. Use the first reaction, see I've put that in capitals, of the arrow flight after the arrow leaves the bow to tell you about arrow spine. Do not look at the second reaction because that's going to be essentially the correction on that. This is the most important thing that I wanted to kind of get to today because it can confuse a lot of people that the angles are different. And what you would expect to see if your arrow flight was perfect, I wouldn't say this one is actually perfect, but what you can see here, if we press play, is you can see it's essentially an oscillation around the middle. You can't quite see it when it fully leaves the bow there, but there's not a massive swing to one side. So if you were seeing the arrow at a very close range, if you're shooting with the stabilizer touching the target, what I like to do is you basically go as close as you can, you shoot an arrow, and you'll probably see, even if your tuning is perfect, a slight angle of the arrow in the target. That's fine. Take a step back, shoot another one. You'll see a slight angle still. Take a step back, shoot another one, you'll see a slight angle. If you've got a good tune, you will probably be able to see the angle vary a little bit one way, a little bit the other way, a little bit one way, a little bit the other way, as you're stepping back through the cycle of the arrow bending. That's what you would expect to see, because it's not going to be perfectly one way or the other. Depending on where you're catching the arrow as it goes into the target, there might be a slight bend. If you start with your stabilizer touching the target and you've got a strong arrow angle, and then you step back and you've got a strong angle the same way, and then you step back and you've got a strong angle the same way, and then you step back and you've got a strong angle the same way again, that is telling you something. So this is where you learn to spot the difference between the arrow angle giving you a consistent reading and one that's maybe just the normal variation in your tuning. So that's the kind of most important thing that I wanted to give you today, if you like. On that note as well, in terms of if you're doing that, I want to scroll down here. And this is why on the tuning page as well, I mentioned about this 30-meter shooting with the white side of a target, because this is really useful. So as it looks like, you just basically get a big target face, put it on the white side, and you can shoot ideally with like a flow green or a flow red knock. Those are the two most visible. And you just want to watch your arrow flight as you shoot. So you can do this with either Bareshaft or fletched. I like to do it with fletched after I've essentially done the basic tuning. I like to just check the fletch as well, the fletched arrows, and just shoot your whole quiver of arrows, your whole dozen arrows or whatever, and just check the arrow flight. You're looking for any consistent movement one way, for example. If you have one arrow that goes a little bit left, one arrow that goes a little bit right, that's just your normal variation in your release. But if you see every arrow going to the right, the knock is way right or the knock is way left, that's where you need to kind of revisit your tuning and check. So this is where it's really important. The 6 things that I wanted to show you today, yes, maybe the first one was on limb alignment, but the other ones are essentially all about having multiple different tests for your tuning to basically say, okay, am I just getting a rogue test here? Or are these tests all matching up and making sense together? Because if you just use one test in isolation, if you just check, the Bareshaft, and you only check one Bareshaft, and you only check it at 18 meters, it's not giving you a complete picture. But if you check the arrow angle at close range, if you check your Bareshaft at 18, you check your Bareshaft at 30, and you check your arrow flight with the white target face that I showed you, and they all look okay, it's almost impossible for you to have a bad tune. Because there's no way you would have a bad tune and all of those things to look good. It's just not possible. So this is why you need multiple different tests. Don't rely on just one, and especially don't rely on one Bareshaft or kind of one distance. So yeah, that's it for today. Let me know if there's any other things you struggle with in terms of tuning in the comments below, and I'll probably make a part 2 to this video in future because there's a few more kind of points that I want to cover as well. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.